Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and I'm very excited to be back doing pods again after 2 long months of the hiatus. I greatly appreciate the support while I was gone. You can check out the Everything College Basketball magazine. It's officially live as I'm recording this, Friday evening, October 20th. We greatly appreciate all the support. It'd be $10 for hundreds of pages of previews, every single team in college basketball, some really exclusive interviews. That's not what I came here to tell you about primarily. You'll hear more about that in detail on Monday. Looking forward to recording with actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll tell you. The Jim Range podcast. We're going to be doing 21 questions previewing the college basketball season again. That was one of my personal favorites last year, and I'm very excited to bring this one back for you as well. The main thing I actually wanted to bring to you before we get into part 1 and part 2 of the NBA over-unders win totals podcast with Grayson Hill. We previewed what we thought the win totals were, where we sprinkled with some of our action. And you're probably wondering, gambling content, that's interesting. Well, as of apparently technically January of 2025, sports betting will be considered legal in the state of North Carolina, at least online-wise. That has passed officially, and it will be released as of January of 2025, which has opened up some really cool avenues here for the show. So I'd like to tell you about the presenting sponsor of any gambling show or segment this season, Sign Up Expert. Sign Up Expert is a really awesome interactive platform where you're able to think, hey, I've been wanting to get into DFS, or I've been wanting to get into sports betting. I didn't know about what the potential was in my area. If you want to take advantage of it and have access to all the exclusive discounts and promotions, a lot of these sites, you can go to signupexpert.com/TPP. That's signupexpert.com/TPP. And you'll see it throughout promotions on the screen throughout episodes, and link in the top of the description as always. For anything gambling related, signupexpert.com/TPP. They're now the presenting sponsor of any gambling segment. Using the links does support the show, and we greatly appreciate that support. Thank you so much to the team at Sign Up Expert and BetStamp for making this possible. I don't want to delay it any longer. You'll hear more about BetStamp and Sign Up Expert as we go through the podcast with Grayson. That's where we got a lot of our lines through things like FanDuel for the Over-Unders podcast. Whichever part you're about to listen to as I'm recording this after the fact, I greatly appreciate the support. Basketball is back very, very soon, less than 3 weeks, and so is this show. Enjoy the episodes with Grayson. All right, as you already heard in the intro, we are going to be doing Eastern Conference. I want to call them over-unders. Win totals is the correct terminology that you corrected me on, and I'm glad you did. At the top, you would have heard some stuff about a really cool partnership. We're super excited to have Sign Up Expert. They're going to be the presenting sponsor for anything we do over here on the Two Pointers podcast for anything gambling related, which is now technically legal in North Carolina. It's supposed to, we had this conversation off recording. It's supposed to be legalized as of January of 2025 is the latest we'll see a sportsbook partner of some kind in any of things of that nature in North Carolina. But I'm just super excited to be back doing pods again. All that stuff is something we'll get to in a second. We're starting with the East. And if you're listening to this and you're like, well, where's the West? Maybe within 24 to 48 hours, you'll see us in the exact same outfits right in the middle of this Monday Night Football game that Grayson so graciously decided to put on a TV behind his computer. So, but we should be good. I'll be keeping up with it as well. But welcome back. I'm super excited to be talking about it again. Talking about basketball. I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's good to be back. The NBA hiatus is never too long, but it flies by more and more. I mean, it's that time of year again. We're sitting here on the 16th. Season kicks off on the 24th, and this last week's going to go by just as quickly as the first 2 months or so. So I'm excited to get into it. East is a lot more interesting now than when you last graced the airwaves because of some Damian Lillard guy got traded, and so now there is a monster duo in Milwaukee. So I mean that's one of the highest ones on the board. I'm not really surprised by it. I mean, it's Dame time, more or less.
Yeah, I'm elated to talk about yeah, like you said, gracing the airwaves. I don't even know if I will end up doing the promo for the magazine in the beginning of this because there's going to be 3 things I have to go over first. But yeah, I'm like burnt out of college basketball, and the season hasn't even started yet, just from writing the previews and stuff. But honestly, the NBA, like, I was kind of the opposite. It was like this hiatus. Like, obviously, I had a reason to enjoy that it was gone. But like, other than like Anthony Edwards and some guys like that playing in the international stuff, like, I kind of enjoyed the fact that we had nothing to talk about. I was just like, oh wow, yeah, Dame did get traded. Wow, that's really cool. Other than that, like nothing happened, which is again kind of nice. But we'll get into all of the nitty gritty of that stuff in a second. I want to go over a few things at the top that will kind of warm it up. I know you normally would maybe do this on like its own segment, whatever, but like the MVP this year is really weird, and I know it's like the clickbaity topic thing, but here we are talking about the MVP. I don't have all the historical data in front of me, but there's some really great creators out there. I'll link some of the stuff of some of their information about this. But the MVP, their history is basically going against, and the reason I kind of talk about it is, the very first team we're going to talk about, I think we're going to do it in order of the teams that I have and how we ranked them. We're probably not far off on the East, but there's a lot of historical data that basically goes against every MVP that we're going to talk about in the Eastern Conference and the top of the Western Conference. So I guess the question I'll lead with before I have a couple of questions to get us kind of warmed up on the over-unders, explain how those work for those that don't gamble. Who do you have as MVP this year? Because, again, I haven't given you any of the historical data, but, like, who are you right now? You have $100 to spend MVP. You can only put it on one guy. Like, who are you putting it on?
I mean, that stipulation is gonna add to my thought process here. Outside of basketball, but as related to performance on the court, I really think even as a huge Thunder fan, I mean, voter fatigue exists. We see it across sports, a lot of different awards. That's why LeBron James doesn't have 7 of these things. Um, People may get tired of the big guys. They really might. And I think if there's some sort of pivot, the NBA MVP is a bit unique in just how effective the media machine can be. Some GMs try to use it to propel their candidate, which did not work. But I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, if this team takes the leap they are forecasted to by a lot of people, Bill Simmons terrifies me by having them fourth. I don't know if I like that or hate that, but they were a 41 team last year. He was an MVP finalist. That's rare. You usually see uh, it takes a top seed, a playoff hosting organization to produce an MVP candidate. So I think if Oklahoma City can take another leap, getting Chet back in year one, his second year as a pro, J Dub, J Will, Giddy, Usman Jing developing, Poku, who knows if he can stay healthy. I think this team is really deep enough as well to hang with the top teams in the West, or the ones we thought. I think there's going to be some shakeups. We'll get to that in the second half. But I think that, yeah, I think the year of the center might not occur this year. And I think if that happens, you start looking outside of the paint, even though Shea lives in the paint. I think that he's a really, really good option. I mean, as far as having $100 to spend value-wise, I don't think it's much better than that. Coming off a 31-point season, points aren't the end-all, be-all, but that's the best scoring season by any Canadian ever. And I think he's only going to get better, which is the scary part. So I think if we get tired of the trifecta of Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, etc., I don't know if Luka is going to be up there team-wise. So that may ding him, as incredible as he is individually. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is just sitting there. I don't know what the odds are, but I know he's not in the top 3 of odds. Jason Tatum's obviously another good option up near the top in odds. But yeah, give me Shea.
So there's two things there that you said that were really important. And honestly, I didn't even think about, like, I kind of wrote a bunch of them down and was like, I have the answer. And the whole reason I'm even asking you is the reason I'm about to tell you. But I mean, dude, I mean, the case is clear for Shea. I mean, like, I guess the only thing you would think is, like, has anybody ever won MVP when there was like because if the team's better, his regression may happen, right? Like, and the regression from 31 to 29 and a half, like, okay, who gives a damn? But, like, I don't know. I will save my thoughts for them as a whole because it will tie into a lot of that stuff for when we get to the West in God knows how many minutes. But really quick, basically, you said it. So, by the way, the center thing, this is the other thing I was going to say. The centers, like, how people, the big men are coming back. Like, we kind of saw that. We kind of knew that. They're coming back in college basketball too, right? The last couple player of the years have been that, obviously, with Edey. 4 of the top, if you go by the Almanac standard, and if you consider Kyle Filipowski a forward or a center, whatever, the top 5 players in the player ranking of the Almanac are all centers this year. So it's like, I mean, that is not changing right now, and I think it's really cool to see that the center's back. So my pick is Jason Tatum, and here's why. There is so much historical data that basically says that, other than Larry Bird, who repeated, obviously, now 40 years ago in the mid 80s, there's three-peats don't happen. And then typically, the case, I guess, against Shea and why we'll talk about them later, is it's typically a top 3 seed, right? So that's kind of like if you look at those parameters alone, plus again, I'll link some of the stuff. I think All Hell B-Ball did one. A couple other guys that are really good. But basically, if you take those two things, Jason Tatum is the only choice. If you basically take out the guys can't win it back to back, and then the Embiid stuff, you basically have to decide whether you think they're going to be a top 3 seed or not, which we're about to get to. So it was kind of my way of segueing it. But Tatum's technically the only choice if you go off just a voter fatigue repeat and the three-time thing, and then also the fact that teams typically do finish in the top 3. So there's some other, like I said, there's some other stats in there about like the efficiency and things like that, shot attempts. Like I don't know. The Celtics got maybe worse. We'll talk about it in just a second. But Tatum is my answer, and I don't really want to debate it. I think we're both right. I think there's a world where either one happens, and I'm not sitting here like, oh my God, no way. So I'll give you this. This is what I wanted to leave with to kind of warm us up a little bit about the East, because the East is weird. We kind of agreed about that off air. And I want to do this for the West too. I'm going to read you these, and this is going to be rapid fire. I'm going to read you these. I'm just going to read you every team, and you're going to tell me, think of it this way. If I told you, if I was a genie in a bottle, right? I rubbed a basketball and I appeared, right? And I said that blank team won the championship. Like when we sat down after game 5 last year, 2 months ago, whatever it was. We sat down and we were like, the Nuggets are the NBA champions. If someone had told you that 6 months before, you probably weren't flabbergasted, right? You probably were like, oh yeah, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray's back, whatever, right? You had a good idea that could happen. There's somewhere in your mind, there was a 1% or more chance that it happens. I want to see how many true contenders that you would be flabbergasted if they won the title. I actually won it. I think this exercise will be important when we do this again somewhere in, let's say, February, right? So the Bucks, Celtics, Cleveland Cavaliers, Knicks, all of those teams, like, okay, I'll start with the top 3. Bucks, Celtics, Cavs. None of those teams.
Those 3 I'm not shocked.
Right. So you rub the basketball genie appears. This team wins the title. None of those 3 you're shocked by. The Knicks. If the Knicks win the title this year, are you flabbergasted completely?
I'm surprised, but not to that point. They're like right in that middle zone of like things go right. I mean, we just had the Heat in the finals. I mean, if something similar to that happens, they get past the Goliath in the West per se. I'm not flabbergasted yet, but I'm getting there quick.
Okay. Philly.
Yeah. I mean,
if they win the title, you're like, oh my God, there's no way they're winning the title, basically.
Yeah, because this whole Harden thing, I can't get past that. If he was bought in for 1 year of his life, then no. I'd put them on the Knicks, but I'm flabbergasted.
All right. The Heat. Probably not, right? I mean, they almost won it last year. I say almost. They were obviously 3 games away.
Because of that.
But yeah.
They found a way last year, so just because of that, I would say no, not quite.
Okay. Atlanta?
Yes.
And then Indiana, Brooklyn, Orlando, Toronto, Chicago, Charlotte, Detroit, Washington. You would have a heart attack if one of those won. Yeah, okay. So the whole point of this exercise, I can't wait to do it in the West. The whole point of this exercise is to compare it to the West in an hour. So you basically have let's just throw the Knicks out the window because I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd be flabbergasted if that happened. Julius Randle might have to be an MVP favorite if that happens, right? So literally there are only 3 teams that can come out of the East in our opinion, because we agree on that. So the whole reason I wanted to do that exercise was to just get a gauge of when we get past Cleveland here in just a moment, we're going to start nosediving towards teams that we're like, okay, like these are all teams that are good and the win totals will reflect that, whatever. But there's 3 realistic contenders. So with that being said, I have Milwaukee. I mean, Milwaukee and Boston are tied. I have Milwaukee ahead of Boston, and I kind of did this in the past 3 years with the pod. I did this I would do the Eastern Conference, whether it was solo. I think we did it together last year or whatever. I have Milwaukee as the number 1 seed in the East, and their over-under or win total is 54.5. Did you go over or under? And let's discuss the Milwaukee Bucks.
I went over. I had them 1 as well. It may trend towards 1A, 1B. I think Boston still has a really, really good squad, but I think Milwaukee, as we sit here preseason, is deserving of the top designation. And then I had them over 55 wins just because, if the Lillard experiment works, I don't know if you really call it experiment because Damian Lillard is a very good basketball player. And obviously the Drew Holiday out piece of it is going to be interesting to gauge and see how that affects the team going forward. But I think that, winning 58 games last year, I don't think that even if Lillard needs to sit or do some sort of load management type thing to make sure he's ready for a deep playoff run, something he really has not experienced in his entire career, which is not a slight. It's truly just more exertion on the body, a longer NBA season. These playoff rounds take 2 weeks now. So with that piece of it, I don't know if they go win 65 games or anything, but I had them at least at 55.
Yeah, 55 seems so low when you consider the fact that, and honestly, I think you said everything perfectly, so I don't have much to add. But when you consider the fact that Chris Middleton played 33 games last year and they won 50, make sure I got the number right. They won 50. I already clicked off the screen.
It was 58 last year.
58, yeah. So they won 58 games last year, and Chris Middleton played 33 games. And I felt like their depth last year was pretty bad. Their depth this year, obviously, they had to give up some of it for part of the Lillard trade. They were obviously able to skate through with some of the picks there. Don't get me wrong. I think they gave up less than they probably could have. But, I mean, there has to be a catastrophic injury for this team not to even be close to 50. Like, for them not to sniff 58 again. Like, I think at this
for
point,
Middleton to miss 50, you can almost consider that catastrophic or as close as you can get. And
I mean, 33 was, right? And they were the number one seed in the East, granted by one game. But at the end of the day, like, I wish I had this overarching thing about Damian Lillard that was going to make this more interesting, because I haven't technically made an opinion publicly about it. But, like, it's Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Honestly, at this point, you could put the YMCA All-Stars out beside them, and I think that they probably win 50 games at this point. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
So, honestly, I hate to say I have nothing to add, but, like, if either of those guys are healthy throughout any stretch of the season, yes, you're going to lose the defensive, prowess that Drew Holiday built, some of that gravity.
Right.
Those playoff series, I know that kind of is going to shift, but you're going to honestly need, like, you're not going to stop Damian Lillard or Drew Holiday. Like, he's going to be really important, don't get me wrong, but, like, he's not the reason they couldn't win a title, I guess is my point, right? Like, if they're playing against these teams, you have a team with Damian Lillard that can get you through the East. And then once you're in the West, like, once you're playing whoever's in the West, it's kind of, God, at that point, if it's Jamal Murray playing like he did last year, I don't know if Drew Holiday would have made a difference at this point. So
yeah, good luck.
That was kind of why I was like, I don't really know what to say, because technically he wouldn't have made a difference last year. It was probably going to be a 4-2 series instead of a whatever it was, 4-1. All right, so we agree. Milwaukee, some of these teams, I feel so bad, like, not spending time on the best teams in the conference, but, like, some of these are
right, but the contenders we have, just by default, less questions about. There's less ambiguity. That's why they're at the top. So
that's a good point. That's a really good point. So I guess I would ask this, and we'll get kind of more into it. You weren't unsure about, I kind of had it as, were there any you were unsure about, most confident, or most shocked? And we can kind of go over that at the end. So far, no. Boston, same exact thing, 54.5. I went with over because at this point, 57, the team got better. I don't know. You can't tell me that Derek White and Drew Holiday is not, like, two of the scariest defenders at guard that you can put together in the NBA right now. Maybe Marcus Smart. Like, if this was Marcus Smart and Drew Holiday we're talking about, like, the opposing guards playing the Celtics might not average 20 points a game combined. Like, it would be nuts.
Oh, yeah.
So, all things considered, whatever. I went with over. I'm curious to where you probably did the same, but I'm curious, I guess, why.
I had them over. I still had them 2. I definitely don't think they're going to get 60. They had 57 last year, like you said. The thing with me is I think the roster itself got better, and we can honestly push aside the Will Porzingis play, the amount of games he did last year, in setting that career tone for him, honestly. Marcus Smart did so much more for this team off the court than on, and you can honestly – the fact that you could ignore the late game Westbrook-esque shot attempts and all that other stuff that he did, well, it's because of leadership, and there's been a lot of questions about Tatum and him stepping into that role. So my biggest concern with Boston is really the locker room itself and how it handles the loss of a guy like Marcus Smart, who, again, contributed more off the court than on, in my opinion. It propelled them to the finals appearance and had them as a top team in the East. I think they still will be without him, but there might be that just cog missing that we might not see on the court explicitly. But, in the confines of the locker room there's going to be a void, and it's just going to depend on who can step up and fill it. And I hope it's Tatum, because then your MVP take is going to probably be right.
Fair. Here's what's funny though. Here's the devil's advocacy thing of the Marcus Smart and others that were gotten rid of in the offseason. If Joe Mazzulla doesn't have a successful year this year, A, he's probably out, and B, it's his fault.
Out, yeah.
It's his fault because they got rid of everybody that ever gave him pushback last year, other than maybe
Grant Williams too. Yeah.
Guys that didn't get along with him are gone.
Right.
They kept Missoula over these guys that, granted, there's more to it to the story, right? You get rid of these guys that didn't help you win a championship. They've been on the team a bunch of years, yada, yada, yada. You got to make a change, right? I get it. Brad Stevens has the cojones, apparently, to do that, right? To go with a guy who's, mid to late 30s, who, I'm not saying his basketball background's not great, played under Coach Huggins at West Virginia, the whole thing, but to have that much confidence in a guy to get rid of Marcus Smart, to get rid of Grant Williams, guys that had their problems, don't get me wrong, but if you're just going A to B comparison here, they got Drew Holiday and they got Kristaps Porzingis. I kind of agree with you. Kind of coming back to the point is I kind of agree with you ultimately. Yes, the locker room thing, like it is going to be huge that Marcus Smart's not there as the leader. I think it just honestly puts Jason Tatum in such a better position to be the leader that he probably should have been anyway. That Marcus Smart was kind of preventing him from being that. And here we are here we are discussing an over when we're like, well, the reason is because of a guy's chemistry in the locker room. But that's just how confident we are in the two teams at the top. It's kind of insane to think that was a difference for them. And I don't know. Like, I can't sit here and think that, like, all these things that changed aside, Joe Mazzulla might be the reason that they don't win the championship with the best team they've ever put together with this core. By the way, talking about, like, the replacing thing and just the kind of, like, thing to think about for the Celtics is Tatum and Brown are the only two guys left from the bubble team. So, I mean, they've tried things in the last 3 years. Yeah, I heard that yesterday, and
That's crazy.
I went, is it true? And yeah, it's true. I looked everything up, and I'm like, there's no way. And yeah, they're the only two guys left from the bubble team. So that tells you that they are trying and willing to put this team together around the two guys that deserve it. Obviously, since we've talked about basketball last, on or off, in any actual substance, I think Jaylen Brown finally got his contract. I mean, like that was how long that went on. Well, that was how long that went on. Was like we like went months, like free agency, texting about football, whatever. Next thing you know, it's like, Jaylen Brown did get a contract, didn't he? Like, because that was such a thing that was such a overarching cloud for them, and it almost made this. It made this season have this weird feeling before that had to get done before they could do anything else. And thank God it did, because here we are with Drew Holiday on the damn roster. I mean, like, it happened. And Drew Holiday's not a Celtic if Jaylen Brown didn't get that extension. I fully believe that. I just don't think
I don't think so either.
There's too many things that would have had to happen. So, all right, so Boston over, Milwaukee over, right? I feel like people are going to be like, you can't all go over. And by the way, for those that want to just unsubscribe right now, please don't. I want you to hang around and drop a like while you're here, and 5-star while you're on Apple or Spotify. But the point I'm making is we didn't do the math, right? We're not going to sit here and tell you that it actually adds up to whatever, 82 times whatever. Anyway, so we're going to have teams that are over, but the whole point is, like you said, you gave some great context, right? Milwaukee is probably going to be well over 54, like probably closer to 60, even though there should be some question marks. Boston, I wouldn't be surprised it was 55, right? They won 57 last year. So again, doesn't matter if we're 1 or 2 off here or there. Cleveland, I have at 3. This is kind of where I wanted to kind of figure out, do you have them at 3 as well? And then if you don't, then we'll kind of go and figure out what the over-under is.
Yes, they are my 3 seed in the East.
Cool. Do you have over or under 50.5?
I have over, and I think it may be really 51 or 52. I mean, they are coming off a 51-win campaign last year, so I feel like they added Strus, but outside of that, no earth-shattering transactions as far as, these first 2 teams really shook things up. But I think they really might be right. It might be the last week of the regular season, and we're still sweating this one.
Here's my problem. I agree. I have them over, and I don't really know how much over, because how did a team that added more pieces, that they got better? I think they got better whether it was Strus or not. Like, they kept a team together, and sometimes that's all you need to do for the most part, unless someone disappeared off the team that I forgot about looking at the rosters. But 51 wins, and the team has another full offseason together with Donovan Mitchell. How can't they get better? Again, this is all barring a major injury. That has to be said. But I don't know. Like 51-31 last year. Vegas, like you said, might be sweating this one out. Vegas knows what they're doing. 51 just has to happen. I don't feel like I'd be floored if they did. Granted, I guess the only pushback would be if all these teams below, but we're probably going to get to the same point in just a minute where they're the last good team. We just went through that exercise. So why would they go down, right? If they went down, it's because somebody else we were just like, what the hell happened to Philly? Like, or whatever, right? Philly won 58 or whatever, and we're like, okay, this is dumb. So that's the only reason I think Cleveland goes under. I think there's no legitimate world other than major injury that Cleveland doesn't go under. And that's the whole, or doesn't go over, excuse me. And the point is like, if they won 49, 50 games, I guess 50 would technically be right, the under, right? If they won 50, I
Right.
still wouldn't be that floored. I think they're still the third seed in the East, so I don't really understand
Oh
what the
yeah.
point of me even describing that is.
I mean, it doesn't help that you can almost. I don't know if you can call recency bias or not. They got embarrassed in that
Yeah,
4-5
fair.
playoff series. Honestly,
They
relative
did.
to expectations for them, which extended well beyond a first round series with the Knicks. Whatever you think about the Knicks, and there's been these weird. And Twitter's a cesspool for valid information, but the Mitchell stuff and 2 feet in, 1 foot out. Is he looking Miami? Is he looking elsewhere? Is he fully bought in? Does he really believe he can win a title in Cleveland? I think he can, but my opinion
I
doesn't
do
matter.
too.
If he's not bought in and he's not in that locker room acting like the best player on and off the court, then they may go under, or we may see a flame out in the playoffs again. And if they do that again, I think the whispers get much louder. But as far as regular season goes, they were a great team last year. Not a ton of material change roster wise, some ancillary pieces moving in and out as every team has. So I'm not as confident in the over, but for the reasons we stated, there's not a lot to not like compared to last year, and they had 51 last year. So I feel good about over 50.5.
You mentioned the cesspool thing, and I'll kind of end with this. Just because a guy goes to his hometown and supports their WNBA team late in the playoffs
Right.
doesn't mean he
Doesn't
wants
mean
to run
anything.
off to the Knicks.
No.
Like, it's dumb. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing I would say about Cleveland, and it kind of just puts a beautiful bow on this, is it kind of ties back to what you said about if he believes that he can win a championship there. They can win a championship if Evan Mobley takes the step he should, right? He was a Defensive Player of the Year
Yes.
finalist, and I mean, all things considered, the offensive game, like, he doesn't even need the 3-point shot to develop right this moment. That could happen in like year 7 or 8, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's
He's
good.
got so
That
much
might be the
time for
thing.
that.
That's great. And that's the thing. They could probably win 4 years before that. So it's like, if they keep this core together, I don't see why they can't. The problem is, like, Garland, Mitchell, 2 small guards. He's going to have to be the reason with the defense. Allen got played off the floor. I have a lot of question marks about Cleveland. They might just be the good regular season team again. And that's okay because they don't have to win the championship this year. I mean, granted, I think Mitchell's contract is this isn't last year, is it? I think it's this year and then one more. So either way, they have time, I
Yeah.
guess, right? So they have time. If not, then whatever. People can attack me in the comments. But so let's go move on to I have the New York Knicks at 4. I know we just made the jokes about Julius Randle, and I went through the order. And if you realize now, I literally just went down the order I was going to eventually get to anyway with you. So for going through the team of being floored by. But I will say this. I don't think we ever actually technically describe what an over-under is, but I think people can look it up, whether we think a team will win more than 45 and a half games. But the Knicks are at 45 and a half. Who do you have? I can't talk. What do you have there? Jesus.
I have him as a 4 seed. So in the
Wow,
same
we are
playoff
4
series.
for 4, huh? Okay, this is
Yeah,
bad,
and
by the way, which means it's not going to happen. So.
Oh no.
But
These are all
on
going to be
that.
out of order.
Of course.
Right. Yeah. So the Heat will be the 1 seed this year, and then we will.
That's
look
a
up.
really
But,
good.
yeah.
That's a really good one. Good. Big over there.
It's a Harden thing. I just can't. As far as in that tier,
No, I get it. Yep.
I have less questions about who will be playing for the Knicks and do they care whatsoever. I think that I had my doubts early on about the fit with Brunson and how that would translate, but it's done well. They won a playoff series, which is not a guarantee in that town, although it probably should be.
Yes.
Again, I just think that I have less questions, therefore I'm inclined to put them higher along with other teams I have less questions about. I mean, do I think they're going to win the title? Probably not. They won 47 games last year, so this total feels about fair. Another one of those, top end heads to Indiana, but other than that, not a ton of change. So I mean, it's kind of like Cleveland, where I don't have many reasons to put them lower win total wise. So if you're going to set it above what they did last year, or just below what they did last year, I feel comfortable taking the over.
Yeah, I'm not going to add much. Continuity is really important, I think, and honestly, you can call it. Maybe I'm burnt out from college basketball and how lack thereof of continuity there is from previewing 90 teams that I'll talk more about later, I'm sure. But there's 30 teams in the NBA. Continuity has to matter eventually. You keep a team together. Cleveland, same way. Like New York, it has to matter that this team is basically identical, right? I mean, Quentin Grimes was starting to show really good stuff there, and he might be the 6th man off the bench that I mean, quickly, obviously, I think he was in the running for sixth man of the year. So, I mean, they're going to have guys that they're going to rotate in and out, and I'm going to be really happy about. I guess I put this in parentheses next to it for me to kind of say out loud that I did have them as my most unsure team in the East. There's maybe one more that we'll get to later, but I had them as my most unsure because honestly, if 44 wins, I don't think that's the tier in the East that they're in. That's what scares me is I think they could go 45 and a half is a weird number, right? Because they win 50
Yeah.
games. They win 45 games. That would be a 2-game regression from last year. And
Right.
I mean, they basically won in the conference like they were supposed to. I mean, they were the tied for the third best record in the conference in terms of conference against conference opponents. So they beat who they were supposed to
Mhm.
beat. So I just don't understand what I'm supposed to. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be unsure about. The problem is it's just 47. They won 47 last year, 45 and a half. It should seem easy that it's an over, but like that team has a major injury. I mean, we're talking about a play-in team. That's kind of the issue I'm kind of running into. So
Oh yeah, especially this Eastern Conference too. It's not. Yeah, that's not tough to imagine. I guess it's more just faith in the continued play of Brunson. You mentioned Grimes, RJ Barrett's still there. He's got plenty of room to take steps forward. That would certainly help him get
the room has
there.
been there a while. So
Yeah, Mitchell
he's had a
Robinson,
chance.
the 100th rated player from whoever did that for clicks the other day. So again, it's you don't love a lot, but you don't hate much either. So them being smacked in the middle of the playoff seeds, the top eight, I guess, it seems fair. But like you mentioned, they're not as deep as these teams above them. There's not a lot of wiggle room as far as things go badly. Like if they have a Middleton type injury, they're not going to be the 1 seed. They're not going to be the 4 seed. They might be a play-in team if they're lucky. So that the margin for error is a lot slimmer. But again, I feel comfortable putting them here, especially given what I think about Philly.
That's a great segue. Philly at 48 and a half. So the Vegas knows what they're doing comment. I There has to be an exception to the rule, and I think this is one, right? The question for me is this line fishy? Or I guess the way I would ask it is this line fishy, or are we undervaluing just how important it is for we've seen it plenty of times where guys just show back up and because they know that he literally, I don't know if people know this, he could lose. I mean, technically if he doesn't play this year, there's now a new rule in the CBA that says he could lose free agency, like lose his right to
Right.
signing a full contract. So that's my question, I guess, is are we undervaluing how important it is for James Harden to get the next contract when we realize he probably isn't going to get a next contract if he doesn't play? Or
Yeah.
are we
Yeah.
just like, or is just 48 and a half suspicious? I guess is my question. So I don't really know how to ask the question, but like I went with under, and did you as well?
Yeah. I went under two. They won 54 games last year. So you look at it, you're like, well, how the hell is this below 50 now? It's because the drop off from James Harden to Patrick Beverly is a lot more than 6 wins. So should he sit out, opt out, eat out? I don't care what it is. They're going to have a lot of problems. And I love Maxi, but they're going to have a lot of problems because at his best, he is on some nights. I mean, especially in the playoffs, he was the best player on that team. So whether or not that's going to be a consistent product, whether or not he cares enough to show up, report to camp, season, whatever, that murkiness is why that total is this low. And I'm not inclined to think that it's going to just magically sort itself out because he's been on so many teams already. And I mean, they just got through the entire Ben Simmons saga. That's the whole reason he's even there. I hate it for Embiid that he's having to put up with this. I mean, Maxi's a great player too, but he's not going to carry this team to 50 wins or I guess 49 to hit this over. I don't think. And if this hard thing becomes a true saga going into the season, and some weeks he doesn't want to play, some weeks he doesn't. I mean, if it turns into a true Kyrie thing for different reasons, I think that's going to have a similar impact on the team. So I went under. I think they're a playoff team. They have one of the best players in the NBA, one of the more promising young guards in the NBA, but it's outside of that, there's Tobias Harris. So, I mean, there's not, like we've been saying, the margin for error just gets lower and lower and lower. And if a player of Harden's caliber is not a guarantee to even play, then I've got to ding him a little bit.
Yeah, 58 games played last year. 1,000 career games too, by the way. I feel like that snuck up on us. But to play 58 games last year, 21 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds. That just, I mean, I don't know if that just maybe I sound crazy thinking that like that. I'm surprised that that was his stat line. To the fact he even got above 20. Forgot he was at almost 11 assists. I mean, the natural regression of what we've seen from James Harden has to be the reason I have to go under anyway, right? Regardless of all the other things, right? I don't think he's capable, even if he plays 58 games. That there again, I think the Maxey thing is interesting. I think he can take another step, but like you're asking Tyrese Maxey to be the reason that this team wins over 49 games. Like that is
Right.
a number that I can't. I don't think I could get to anyway, right? So I'm kind of like, you
Yeah.
know, they won 54. Here's the problem though, right? Like, and you might have said this. I may have missed it because my internet's acting goofy all of a sudden. The StreamYard's telling me to get closer to my router, and I'm like, I can touch my router from my desk. So, 54 last year though. Like, that's just
Yeah.
again, is this
Oh
line
yeah.
fishy? Is what I keep coming back to, and it scares me. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a over under gambling segment, but you're not going to catch me putting my hard earned money on Philadelphia for any reason, whether that's over or
No.
under, right? And I think the
Yeah.
over is possible, so that's the kind of the scary part. So let's move on to Miami because we got to start getting through some of these East teams here because there's probably some questions we'll kind of get to, or I'm sure there's a team that I'm looking at going, we're probably going to stop there longer than we think. So Miami, you mentioned earlier about some of the, I think that with the Knicks, you worded it like this. I think you said something like the way the roster looks, or I think it was Cleveland actually, where it was basically like, how do I feel about the way this team's put together? I don't know how deep it is, whatever, right? Some of the secondary pieces here. I'm not sure Miami's much better than Butler, Hero, and Adebayo. Like they lost two really important pieces, and I'm just not sure how this team gets put back together again. Here's the crazy thing: this is probably our first under. I guess we went with Philly. That was probably the obvious one. This is probably our first under that we probably had to really think about because under at 44, we're talking about the 6th seed here, right? Like I'm just telling you, it's my way of
Right.
telling you I'm going under as well, or under here. 44 is pretty much where I feel like they'll end up. 44, I mean 45, I'd be shocked by. I know that's one win, but like it'd be half a game under. But I mean, you lose one of those guys for a significant period of time. Like I know they lost Hero, so maybe that doesn't count as much. But like we're talking like, I mean, what is this team without Adebayo? I don't think we've seen that in a long time. So like, I just don't even know what I would think.
Not
Like Butler,
40 anything. Yeah.
exactly. So that's why I'm like, there's just too many uncertainties about what happens after player number 3. And, I guess sometimes it's about, especially in the East this year, you put your best 5 guys on the floor. I just don't know who 4 and 5 is. I mean, Martin's there still and that kind of thing, but I just don't know if I'm happy. I just don't know if I'm confident enough in like who player number 4 and 5 is. At that point, we saw last year. I mean, we were talking about it in the finals recap shows. We were looking at like down the bench and we're like, okay, well, if Strus made 0 that game, or I think it was game 2, we're like, oh, cool, he made 2. He made 2 points or whatever it was the whole rest of that second half, 1 for 11 or whatever you said it was. And I'm like, cool, he's their 7th, technically this guy, that guy, he's their 6th guy off the bench. Like, what are we talking about here? This series is over. So how are they going to go a
Right.
whole season like that? So anyway, a long-winded there. Maybe I'm undervaluing Jaime Jaquez, but he's a rookie. So
Nah, I
I
mean,
want to.
Strus and Vincent off the face are big. Haslam exiting his role as a player. I think he's still with the organization. So that goes back to the leadership thing I had with Boston. But I think it's really just trusting the organization and the coach. They're a lot more consistent than this team may be, but I think you have to put trust in them to put pieces back together when they do lose guys like Strus and Vincent that were absolutely responsible for making to the finals. And they didn't have a great final series, but they were into a juggernaut. I mean, that's a lot of teams. I think every other team in the NBA loses that series out of the East. Now, maybe not in 5, but you know, they pretty much met expectations for that series. Their clunkers aside, but I mean, they had Zeller minutes in that series, and he's not even there anymore. So you mentioned, if Bam gets hurt, if your season hinges on Thomas Bryant, you have large questions. And I know Butler's a hell of a player. He can absolutely, he's going to go in. He's the opposite of Harden. He will go play. He would rather die on the court than do anything that Harden's doing. But I think there's only so much he can do is the problem because he has no real second fiddle. I mean, Lowry, you hope he plays a
Yeah.
lot of the season. I mean, talking about national regression, that's just, I mean, that's Father Time. That's nothing of his doing.
Right.
So you hope to see him on the court. He's a great player. You never want to see guys sunset years shortened by injuries. So hopefully he's there. Hero's going to have to play big minutes for this team. Hopefully he remains healthy after just the disaster, the broken hand, all that stuff. Yeah, it's it's tough because you're thinking the East champion is not going to win 46 games, but it's you have to think back. They were the 8th seed last year. This was not some contender in the East. And even when the playoff record was set, everybody said, "Okay, Milwaukee in 4 or 5," and moved on. And that was the end of that entire series analysis. But I think that they don't necessarily need a good regular season to make noise, as we saw literally 3 months ago. So I don't feel as bad
Yeah.
going under here, just because you mentioned the pieces they had outgoing. I mean, they could still go from the play into the East Finals. That's how much I think of Spo and the organization as a whole. But as far as regular season goes, that's not been their concern ever anyway. So I feel comfortable going under here.
Yeah. I'm just looking at their roster now, and I'm kind of like, Kevin Love, year 15. Kyle Lowry, year 17. 17, by the way. No.
Yeah.
Father Time would be an understatement, I think. And then Butler at year 12, and then the next closest guy is like 8 and 6, or 8 or 6, right? And you're talking about like Josh Richardson. So like significant guy that will play minutes there. Adebayo, obviously, that's an assumptive. He's been in the league 5-6 years, but there's just not enough. I guess my fear is there's not enough players that have played playoff series. I guess is kind of where and you could sit here and be like, well, what about Hero? What about this guy? What about Caleb Martin? Whatever. I'm talking about guys that I'm ready to rely on. Like if Jaime Jaquez was
Right.
his 4th year, he might be the 4th best player on this team as a rookie. I mean,
That's
can you imagine
different.
what he'd be
Yeah.
like with 3 more years in the Heat, right? So I don't know. And by the way, your point on Haslam before we move on. So you mentioned he's not, he's no longer technically a player, right? They retired him, the whole thing. He's
Right.
not listed on the roster.
Mhm.
And then you scroll down to coaching staff on NBA.com. So I hope this is accurate. Uh, Spoelstra head coach, and then you have 5 assistant coaches. He's not listed. You have a player development coach and a trainer, and he's not listed. So I'm wondering what the
Okay.
role is for him. Not has anything to do with this win total. I'm looking at it. I'm going. I thought you were right. I thought he was. I said in some way involved, and you would think it'd be. What is he better off doing? Sitting on the bench somewhere, or sitting on. He's from Florida. He's not going to
Right.
go retire to Florida. So like, he's not going to. He went to FIU for crying out loud. I mean, like at this point, he
Yeah.
needs to be on this bench. He might be the difference. Hell, he might be the difference in the over under. Honestly, at this point, but I don't know. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we're gonna keep rolling as we got to finish the East, relatively in 20-ish minutes here, and then, as like I said at the top, we'll turn right around and do the West again in the middle of this Chargers game. So thank you again. I have Atlanta at 7, and let's just call the Heat their own tier. Philly their own tier. Let's just pretend like those two are kind of lumped together. They're 5-6, which are we are officially in the same order, 1 through 6.
Yeah.
We officially
I have
okay.
Atlanta 7. So yeah,
Okay.
1 through
All
7.
right, this is going to be bad. I cannot wait to see Atlanta finish 4th, and we're both like, what? No. So I have Atlanta 41.5. I have over, and here's my problem. I think the lack of us doing math might catch up to us here in the middle of the East, because I think Atlanta over would mess with the playoffs and where I think they would finish. Because if you look at last year, let's just assume it happens perfectly like last year, right? Atlanta finished 41-41. So they would basically need to win one more game, but we would think they're going to be a seed better, which I guess that technically wouldn't matter, right? So maybe that isn't too bad. We're only one win off there.
Right.
Okay. So I have Atlanta
Mm-hmm.
over, but it's probably 42 or 43. I'd be shocked if it was more than 43. So where do you have it?
I have them over as well, and that was one of the last ones I actually penciled in, just because of you mentioned it. This number seems dead on. They've won 41 and 43 the last 2 years, so they've been hanging around this tier for a good little bit now. I would have gone 3 years out, but they only played 72 with COVID, et cetera. So I didn't really feel
Yeah.
like that was as important. But I mean, the only real changes, John Collins is out, and they've got Patty Mills, Wesley Matthews, and some draft picks in. So not landmark change as we opened with, but a lot of continuity would be the word for this team, and I think that is going to translate into 1, 2, maybe 3 more wins, and we need a 1 game improvement to hit this, and I feel comfortable just because of where they are seed wise. They would still be duking it out with the play-in teams. But I think that them being a top 8 seed is something I'm pretty comfortable saying this year, and I think that by way of that alone, I think being above 500 is not a big stretch.
Yeah, that's what's so weird about this is like, I mean, you mentioned the one game thing again. It's like, okay, they literally need to win one game, but like that they've 41 last year, 43 the year before. So technically, if we're just sitting here like splitting hairs over this, one more game would be 42, and then they would have done the three-peat there 41, 42, 43. So really,
Right.
the way what it came down to for me was, do I really think that they're going to I think 7 is the cap, which sucks because I don't think the East is good, but I also think they're not better than anybody ahead of them. That's what scares me. Is I think they're better than the 7 seed.
That's the piece too. Yeah.
I think they're a top 6 team in the East. But I can't do that because the Philly is at least, I mean, Embiid alone is worth 40 wins for crying out loud if he plays half the year or more, right?
Right.
So I mean, I can't sit here and be like, and I'm not a huge Trae Young fan. I've made that very clear over the last however many years now. But you basically, here's what it came down to for me, and I won't add a bunch on this because there's a lot of teams after I actually like. I like a lot of teams after, but it just, the way numbers had to fall, somebody had to suck, right? So basically, one player has to have a breakout year. Jalen Johnson, AJ
Right.
Griffin, Onyeka Okongwu. They might trade Clint Capella for crying out loud. I mean, like, and I'm just saying that from a money standpoint.
Yeah.
If they really want to go
I
all in
think
for it,
Bay's
and he's
there
not
as
working,
well.
right?
There's
And
yeah.
he's an expiring. I know I think he's maybe not expiring. He's an expiring in our fantasy basketball league. I have him for $75,
That's right. Yeah.
and I did drop him actually. So not a fantasy contributor, I learned, but willing to lick my wound there. But you mentioned Wesley Matthew. I mean, that he's got playoff experience if I've ever seen that. So
Right.
I mean, there's got to be something. Somebody here has to make a. I mean, Hunter would be like the long shot, the dart throw. Is he ever going to stay healthy and make some kind of run? So somebody
Right.
has to be good. And I really like the rookie class. I just now that I look at the roster again for another time. I mean, I love Bufkin and I love Seth Lundy and I love Muhammad Guy. I loved all those guys coming out of the draft. I think I had them all in the top 55. I think I had Lundy in the late 40s, Guy in the early 50s, and then or just mid 50s there, and then I had Bufkin in the lottery. So all those guys I think are capable of playing. I don't know. This team's deep, and I think that's kind of where we ended up with the 7 was just they're talented enough that they'll be there. So
Right. I
sorry,
mean, you
Hawks
add
fans.
together several slight factors, and that translates to one win. So
Yeah,
that's not really,
exactly.
yeah.
That's basically. I mean, and you could look at it like this: is it Mike Bray going from Notre Dame, legendary Notre Dame head coach? Is he the difference on their bench? I mean, their assistant
Right.
coaching roster. You could. I mean, there's some capable coaches that are riding the pine
People
for
are going to
them.
get
So
poached. Yeah.
yeah. So all right, Indiana, the team I actually like. I think I like Indiana, and honestly, here's what's are we 8 for 8?
I thought I was going to get you finally. I almost put him 7. I knew I should have.
No, here's what's crazy though is the only reason I didn't. I love this Indiana team. Right? I want to be on record about that now before the season starts. I love this Indiana team, but Vegas knows something. 38.5 still feels kind of low, and over would still mean that they're. Guess what? The math adds up. They're still right behind Atlanta. So I really was like, I would
Right.
have to expect them to be that much better. And like 38.5. What did they finish last year? I got to go back again. This stupid thing's not loading.
35 last year.
35. So like we're asking for like a 5-win jump if we really think they're going to hit the over because they're going to
Right.
hit 39. They're probably going to win 40 or 41. Let's be real, right? So
Yeah.
we're 8 for 8. Good grief. Do you have Indiana over as well? You have to because of the math, right?
Yeah, I do. I think they could
Yeah.
win 40. I don't know. They're not going to win 45. Sorry, Joel. But I think that, I mean, there's not a lot to hate. I'm not as optimistic about Bruce Brown, what he can bring with a bigger role, but
Yeah.
you don't really need a ton. Halliburton's the best player on that team. That's not going to change. Mathurin is going to be really, really good. They brought in Obi Toppin down low. Miles Turner is finally committed. He's no longer a hypothetical Celtic as he has been for like 5 years.
I'm
So that
so
cloud
glad
is
that's
kind of
over.
cleared.
I told myself 2 years
That
ago
was
I'd never
every
put him in
early
another
season.
trade.
Yeah.
Ever again. I told myself 2 years ago. I said I'm never going to put him in a trade machine ever again, and I don't think I broke that promise. So here we are. Very happy to say that.
No, yeah. I mean, the
Thank
rookie
God.
class led by, of course, Jarris Walker. I mean, there's a couple guys
Gotta
I
play.
love about that. Oscar Tshiebwe, undrafted, but he's there. Like that, you never
Yep.
know how those guys can do. Very, very notable college name, and we'll see how that translates. But I think that, yeah, I mean, a 4-win jump is the minimum to get this over from last year in the 35. But I really think they can do it. I love the starting 5. That has a lot of potential, and they're going to be one of those teams that the effort on a given night could be enough to steal one they maybe shouldn't. And so, if you get one of those a month, I mean, you're looking pretty good. So I like Indiana a lot. I really did think that was going to be the one where we bucked on, but
I have a bad feeling we're about to go 1 for 10. I really, or 10 for 10. I really do, because I think we agree. We've done shows enough together. We talked enough about basketball. I kind of have an idea of where our brains are. I think there's some differences somewhere, but yeah. With that being said, I'd like to move on to number 9. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure we definitely went number 9. I have Brooklyn and I have the over, and I think they win 38 games.
yeah, it's Brooklyn
Yeah. Yep. It is.
because we did not compare notes. I swear to God, this
I
is
promise.
completely.
Yeah.
I showed him literally nothing. Yeah, I mean it's the Mikal Bridges show, and I think that given Ben Simmons' mental capacity to put 2 feet on a court for several games is going to help. I mean, he's not the worst player in the world, although if you need a layup in the playoffs, maybe look elsewhere. But I
Yeah.
think outside of that, he really is a good player, and I think he's going to be overpaid the rest of his contract. But that's that ship's already sailed. That's a given.
Yeah.
But I think he really can contribute to a team that is full of guys that were throw-ins in a trade, and no one believed in him. And I mean, we saw the entirety of the whole Cam Johnson show last year, which is crazy. He was scoring like 40 points a night for 2 weeks. So I mean, it's just we're not going to get that necessarily, but I really do. I mean, Dennis Smith's there. They got some other underrated additions. Harry Giles, Darius Baisley, a decent rookie class as well in Brooklyn. So I think that the combined effort of all these guys is going to do. I mean, Nicholas Claxton, one of the best defenders in the league. Dinwiddie's been somewhat of a mainstay as a pretty solid player in the league for a while. This was a 45 win team last year, although they got the little head start with the I guess you could call it big three.
Glad you said it. I was about to go through that, so I'm glad you said it. That was the
Yeah,
holdup for me. The big holdup for
so they
me.
will be worse this year.
They will be 100%.
They will be worse, but will they be bad to the point where they're not a playing team? I don't think that I'm not there. I think they're a playing team. Now this could land squarely on 37. But
That would be an all time bad beat. It would be because I think they're better than 37, barely to be
I think
fair.
yeah, right. It might not start with a 4, but it doesn't have to. We get 2 games in there to play with. So
Here's my only thing I'll say, as just for the sake of time and the fact that there are some teams behind, I think are interesting to talk about. So whether you think Bridges leap is all NBA caliber, like he's going to be better, right? He's going to be good. We saw that in wherever the heck they played that tournament, Singapore, whatever it was, Philippines. The 2 things I had a problem with, or the 2 things I guess that kind of balanced themselves out, which is why they landed perfectly at 9, is you mentioned the head start. I think it's a great way to put it, right? Katie and Kyrie were the reason that team. I mean, I think we talked about it actually, or I talked about it with someone on a pod. I think they had like a winning record by a resounding amount, and then they had a losing record by 2 games after they both were out of the building, and they still finished at 45 wins. Like that is, they're not going to win 45 games again. I will put my money on that, but I do think they can still hit an over at 37.5, 38, whatever. The kind of positive point to that would be the Katie Kyrie thing being the negative point is they have a bunch of dudes I like. You mentioned the rookie class. Like I like Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges. I love Dariq Whitehead. I was all year. That was I don't care about the foot. Saw him in person. Wasn't wavering from that. I think non-injury. We're talking about a guy that should have been picked in the top 6. Royce O'Neal's a good player. Darius Baisley, Lonnie Walker, Ben Simmons, again, whatever you feel about him at that point. Terry Giles, Day'Ron Sharpe, Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, Cam Thomas, Spencer Dinwiddie, Nick Claxton. These are all guys I like. I like all of these guys, and it's honestly this team is the example of why we need NBA expansion. I'm not going down that rabbit hole today, but the point is like this teams. There are going to be DMPs from all of these guys, or they're going to spend a lot of good quality time in the G League, which is totally okay because I'm not saying that Noah Clowney needs to be out there as the 9th man next year. He does not. He needs to be in the G League. But the point is some of these guys need NBA minutes. Dariq Whitehead, I think he could benefit from playing in the NBA immediately. But the point is he's going to have nights. I mean, he may play 40 games this year because of how deep this team is, and I think that's why I went over. So,
right. And just quickly, I misspoke. Cam Thomas had the Linsanity run to close regular season, not Cam Johnson. They're both.
I mean, Johnson had a good year too, but yeah, no, I understand.
Oh, absolutely.
I think I knew what you meant because the Cam thing. I was like, yeah, Cam, that makes sense. But I forgot they had both of them, so I honestly was just no, I get it, yeah, because we all watched it. We were like, this is nuts. This shouldn't be happening. Like, and by the way, looking back on it, I used to not do. I didn't used to do top 30s and top 60s for drafts. Josh and I the first year did. I think we did just our 5 favorite players, and we had like one sleeper or the whatever. And Dayron Sharp we agreed on was our sleeper because he didn't think I'd pick a Tar Heel, and who's on this team. And Cam Thomas was my like 3rd favorite player in that draft. Obviously, it was not based on 1, 2, 3 at that point. It was based on
Right.
just picking 5 guys I liked. And here we are. I was not shocked by that Cam Thomas run. I just want to make that clear to people. So that pod is out there. You can find it. All right, Orlando. Are we 10 for 10? Did you do the magic? Make it into the play-in? Oh damn! I really thought we were going to be there. No, actually, I probably didn't. I don't know why. You probably have either the Bulls or the Raptors here. Would be my guess.
Yeah, I've got Toronto.
Let's just do Toronto now then, because you probably have Orlando 11 or 12.
Yeah, I've got them next.
So you have them 11. So then, yeah, let's do
Yeah.
Toronto. Get them out of the way because I honestly have nothing to say about Toronto really. So you have Toronto. They're at 36 and a half. I have them at 11. You have them at 10. So honestly, at this point, it's just a matter of young team versus older team. 36 and a half. I had to go over based on mathematics alone, but like if they went under, I wouldn't be shocked. And honestly, that's kind of where I fell, and that's why I put them at 11 because I think, and we'll talk about Orlando in a second. The reason they're at 11 is because of how I feel about Orlando. Is kind of my best way to put it for why they're 1-2. And I'm honestly not like, I would love to have gone 15 for 15 with you. That would have been great. But honestly, like, I think I always have a team every year. Last year, I think it was, I don't remember. I think it was Detroit or whatever. I always pick a team to just finish ridiculously over what I think they should. A young team, to be clear. Yeah, I think it was Detroit because they won like 17 games, and I picked them to finish like 11th in the East or something stupid like that. But anyway, I have Toronto over, but only mathematically because it had to be. So.
Yeah, they're going to be worse than last year. They had 41 last year, but obviously they can fall short of that and exceed the 36 and a half. So I think I feel pretty good about that. It's more of a belief that we've been talking about Toronto blowing it up for like 2.5 years now after the entire campaign of Shea's definitely going to demand a trade to Toronto has died, thankfully, because that was ignorant from the start. But I, they've got Dennis Schroeder in town now. OG Anunoby for however much longer he's there. Scotty Barnes will be there for a while. Pascal Siakam, another guy on the Twitter trade block constantly. And then, Jacob Pertl also down low for them. They lose Fred VanVleet to Houston, who gave him like $1.6 billion, which we'll get to that in an hour. But I don't know if I love that. Grady Dick in as a rookie. Noel, the talented guard, undrafted, I think. I didn't jot his name down, but another guy that could pop towards the end of the roster. So it's more a belief that this team stays mostly together. I don't think they really pull the trigger on a massive rebuild, which would see OG and Siakam probably out the door, in which case they will plummet under 36 and a half, and they will not make the play-in. But I think that it's just one of those things, kind of like I alluded to with Miles Turner. Some guys are rumored to be on the move, definitely moving, not staying. The dust settles, the trade line bell rings, and they're still there. So I think if this team gets through the deadline without a complete disassembly, I think they're better than 36 and a half. Now, I don't think they win 40 or 41 like they did last year. But I think as constructed, as we sit in October, I have belief in this team to sneak into the play-in. And like you mentioned, math-wise, but where I have them seed-wise, I have them over 36 and a half.
So I was wondering a couple of things, and you mentioned it was Marquise Noel. You were asking if he was undrafted.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like 4'11". He wasn't going to get drafted. So yeah, he wasn't. He was signed. Yeah, he probably should have honestly been drafted, but yeah, no, he's like 4'11". No, he's not. But I guess my only point would be it's less about the Raptors. It's more about I'm glad we both had. It's two things. I'm glad we both had a teardown team. I feel like there's not always one. We expect a trade deadline to be good, but I think situationally sometimes I think it's not bad. The other Orlando did it a few years ago, right? And they kind of they sold the farm, and here we are. I think they're closer to a title than farther eventually. So it kind of paid off for them. I think it's not a bad thing. And we'll get to my sell team in a second, which is very obvious. But Toronto, I guess the whole point I would come up with is if you have over 36 and a half, and so do I, by the way, to be clear, I have 37. Again, Orlando, we'll talk about in a second. I have them. The fact that your 10 seed is going to win less than 40 games that's where the regression in the East becomes. Because I think the teams below are going to be terrible, but honestly, I think some of the teams below are going to be better from a standpoint of where they finished last year. Again, Detroit 17, Charlotte 23 wins. Like some of these teams are just, they have to get better. It just has to happen. There's no reason it
Right.
wouldn't happen. And the fact that Toronto, in basically both of our eyes, is a 10 or 11 seed, and they're going to win potentially 37 games doing it, that's where you're going to see the regression in the East, is that weird tier
Right.
where we just, anything can happen. If they sell the farm, then they're in contention for whoever the heck is the number one pick next year. And I don't even want to try to think about that right now in October. So Orlando, I'll kind of just go ahead and just kind of give you why. 37.5, I went with over, and I do think that they're going to be the team. I don't think that I think the 10 seed's still going to be in that like 40 number mark. It just has, like, I feel like that's like the number. Last year, the 10 seed was the Chicago Bulls, 40 and 42. So why can't the Magic win 40 and 42? I don't know. I mean, it would be a big over from what Vegas thinks, but I have Orlando as this. It's going to happen eventually, and I can't keep thinking it's going to happen and then not pick it finally. So I'm just, it has to happen eventually, and I think this is the year where the Raptors get cute, somebody gets hurt. I don't know. It's going to be between those two. I think we're agreeing it there, but Orlando's got to get better. They're just so good, and honestly, their best two, I would almost even feel better about right now than Toronto's best two, just because of some of the departures. So I don't know. I mean, Siakam, I guess that's maybe a hot take, whatever. But I don't know. Siakam and Barnes, you're asking a lot from two guys that I don't think can shoot a jump shot outside of 18 feet. So I don't know. I just think there's some question marks there. I love Wagner. I think he's one of the best players. My biggest draft miss of my life, not just career at this point, like biggest draft miss of my entire life. I think I had him like, wasn't even really doing like posted lists back then, but I think I had him somewhere like late first. I mean, it's just good Lord, what a miss. But anyway, I think they're gonna be good. Paolo showed some really promising stuff. I know he was kind of in and out of the lineup and wherever I said the Philippines or wherever they played this year. God, I can't even remember. But I think those two alone are going to be really good. I think the point guard thing's going to scare me. They still got to figure that out. I don't know who the heck's going to average more than 4 assists for this team. So there we go. Orlando, I was kind of long-winded, but Orlando, I think, can get it done finally.
Yeah, I think they're a year away. Outside of losing Bol, that's not my only reason for this. But I think that they have so much promising young talent in so many places. I just want to see it for a year, and I would feel comfortable being wrong about it because I think they truly are close. So I think this time next year, I probably have them in my play-in, barring some sort of just crazy front office something. I think that Anthony Black, Jet Howard is a great addition to an already deepening pool of young talent. I mean, you mentioned Franz, and that's obviously a lot to be excited about. Suggs there as well if he can stay healthy. He had some wrist things, something. I don't know. It was unfortunate to see because we didn't get to see him a lot. But I think with that, more NBA minutes, more experience there, I think they really are building something special. And they really did just decide, okay, we're not going to like half reset or soft launch. We're just going to go down straight to the bottom and build back up to the top. But I think they're at that trajectory.
Yep.
I still think it's going to start pointing upwards to that degree yet. As far as the win total, I went under. That was one of the ones I was more unsure about. Honestly, I think they could win right at 37. They won 34 last year. So, I mean, that's a slight bump. Obviously, they could win 5 or 6 games more just because of, there's a lot more room to improve coming off 34 wins than, say, 40 or 45. That is a large designation to get. I just thought back to last year, Oklahoma City won 40 games. Do I think they can pull that off? No, and they can still win 38 or 39. I could be wrong, but I was willing to take the wiggle room.
That's the thing that scared me was like the over still going to hit, even if I think they're going to get to 40 probably, and even if we're off, we're only off by 2 wins. Like we're not like over here. We're not over here being like, okay, well you think they're going to be at 25, I think they're going to be at 39. Like that's not where we are.
But they sleepwalk through like a Sunday game somewhere at 1:00 Eastern. That could be the difference.
That's
just how sharp it is. Yeah. Right.
I'll end Magic with this. I'll say this, and your point about their trajectory is perfect. I just looked at their I love the way the NBA does the breakdown of the rosters when you just click on roster. It just shows you any guy that is technically able to be a player for them, even with the G League and stuff. Their oldest meaningful player in the rotation is Markelle Fultz, and he's 25. Well, Isaac. Okay, I take that back. Isaac's 26. He just turned 26 last week. So basically, 26 is their oldest player. And that gives you time to get guys into their prime in the 20s, mid to late 20s for Paolo, guys like that, or mid to early 20s, excuse me. Anthony Black, I mentioned the point guard comment earlier. He's probably going to be the guy I'm talking about. Like, someone's got to average more than 4 assists at this point. Like Shelvin Mack did a few years ago. Like 3.8 assists was the team leader. I'll never forget that stat. But might be a trivia question. You never know. But Anthony Black will be there. Like you mentioned, Suggs. Like I said, they've got some question marks, but I think there's just sometimes too much talent. Eventually, like, it will fall into place. And I do think they have some good coaching there. So, all right. So we technically just did 10 and 11 together. So this is where it gets kind of weird. Other than the fact that Washington's probably obviously last. We'll get to them in a little bit, hopefully for not long. But my sell team is Chicago. Like, I think at this point they just need to lick their wounds and realize that they made a mistake, ironically buying all their players from the Orlando Magic. So just this full circle moment here on the Two Pointers podcast. But I don't want to spend forever on the Chicago Bulls because this team stinks, and I love the city of Chicago, even though I've never been. I know plenty of great people. I think it's a city that needs something going for it, right, at this point. Other than, like, you know, shitty beer. But I don't know. At this point, Chicago needs something, and I don't think it's going to be the Bulls. And obviously, as we see, it's not going to be the Bears either. So 37.5, I went with under. They're my sell team at the deadline. I think they stink.
Yeah, I mean, they won 40 games last year. They're not doing that. I would be more surprised if they were over 35, honestly. I mean, that's getting a little bold with how sharp these lines can be. And 37.5, I have under two. I mean, I hate the Lonzo part of it just because of how unfortunate it is and how long it's going to take him to come back. He may not be healthy
ever again
before he does not recognize his teammates in the locker room because I mean, Vucevic, DeRozan, I mean, Levine is probably the top. Caruso is tradable. I mean, it's just there's not enough for me to keep this core, if you want to call it that, just strictly dictionary definition, together. You just can't justify it. You can't. And it's not out of spite because Billy Donovan didn't want to coach a rebuild and then left for one. But I guess he's going back to Florida because they're going to be rebuilding. And I think it's going to start this year. Them and Toronto are the two most likely. I've kept Toronto above the 10 line just because I think they do stick it out one more year, right or wrong. I think that Chicago is just more likely to blow it up just because I think you put rosters side by side. There's more to like in Toronto, even outside of 18 feet. This Bulls team, hate it because we grew up watching the Rose and all those teams, and it's gone a long way in the wrong direction, and there will not be a resurgence without a complete rebuild, in my opinion.
Yeah. Here's their cap sheet for what it's worth. In 24-25, this is what's technically on roster. Zach LaVine at 43, I'm rounding down, essentially. DeMar DeRozan's an unrestricted free agent after this year. So, again, talking about the sell thing, that was kind of the eyeball piece there, was if there's a contender that wants to go get him at $28.6 million is all you can get DeMar DeRozan for, with some of the cap increase and some of the throwaway contracts that are really bad some of these teams have. I mean, DeMar DeRozan, $28 million. I mean, their contenders will figure it out. I mean, there's just no reason they couldn't at that
they'll
point.
make the moves, yeah.
$43 million for Zach, unrestricted for DeMar. Lonzo, they actually get the $20 million. I don't know how exactly this works, but they basically get the $21 million as a forgiveness. So essentially, they don't have to pay
like a hardship waiver, something like that.
Yeah, they don't have to pay $21 million to anybody. They give Lonzo Ball still gets the money. I think technically the way that rule works.
Right.
But the team is not responsible for $21 million, so that opens that up. Vucevic on a really tradable contract, $20 million. He'll be due for 24. Kobe White, $12 million. Again, all these tradable contracts is how I kind of came to that conclusion. Patrick Williams is RFA. I mean, he's probably picking that one up, as Brian Russillo would say, or they'll be picking that one up. Alex Caruso, $9 million on a 2-year deal left. So I mean, he's again talking about tradable. I would assume it was $7 million. Javon Carter, $6.5. Andre Drummond is a free agent finally. Dalen Terry, Torrey Craig. In that point, you're getting into some of the smaller contracts. So they're going.
I didn't hear a cornerstone in the midst of any of that. So
exactly.
I think a lot of those guys will be out the door. Two contenders because they truly are good enough. I think individually.
Yeah, it's not. Great point. It's not a knock on the player. Right. It's a knock on the way the team was built. So
Right.
All right. Let's roll. So we are in now to the nitty gritty of things. Charlotte, I have at 13. Are the Hornets at 13 for you? Yes. For the sake of Josh's mental health and well-being. You have him at 14, don't you?
I have him at 14, yeah.
Oh, God. Okay.
Josh needs the truth, and he needs it now.
He needs the truth. So here's the truth. The 30.5 is kind of a weird number, and this was kind of my Is it fishy, or is it because LaMelo only played 36 games last year? So I think that alone, I think he's worth 36 wins. And they're 30 and a half. So, I mean, at this point, I just need them to win 31, and you have them as, do you have over or under for them? So the number really doesn't matter where I think they finish. Who cares? But
I have under because I think he's on the same schedule that SGA was on
okay.
January,
Okay.
not too far in the past, because they're going to get to where they can firmly decide if we sit this very, 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 very talented point guard, we will pick really, really, really high in the draft. So he's going to sprain an ankle for 8 weeks or whatever it was, and he's going to go do something, I hope, responsible, unlike a lot of his teammates, and just sit in bubble wrap and watch this team pretend to care, and then they will draft someone worthy of playing alongside him, because I don't know if they have that person in town right now. They could go all out, win 35 games. What does that really do for them? I don't know that at that point, the diminishing returns on 30 versus 35 wins, you're just bad. It's not.
Here's the problem, though. They've never done the wrap the guy up in bubble wrap in January. They've never done that. Steve.
Well, now that
Clifford's never
Michael
done
Jordan's
it.
not betting on this win total, I think they may do it. That may be. They
That's a
have
good point.
competent ownership in place now too.
This is still
And
Mitch
ownership
Kupchak
is
we're
not.
talking about. This is still Mitch Kupchak we're talking about. That's the problem. That's the issue.
Well,
I can't. I could.
if he stands in the way,
They think they're going to win.
Too.
Yeah, that's true.
They can think all they want.
New
That's
owners,
fine.
New owner syndrome is a real thing. We've talked about it many times.
Ask Phoenix what happens if you get new owners. Yeah, they do what they want to do, and that's the end all be all.
I don't want to touch any of the Miles Bridges stuff with a 35 and a half foot, or let me just say 30 and a half foot pole. How about that? That's appropriate. I think that there's enough young talent that I really enjoy that I just, they can't be worse than 20. Was it 27 last year? I was actually a little bit lower on them.
27. I mean, they can win 30. I still get the under there.
That's true. See, I probably made a mistake.
They don't have to be worse.
Well, this is in stone now, technically. I mean, I could cut it out, but I'm not going to. So 30 and a half, I went with over, you went with under. Who really cares? 13, 14. I have Detroit at 14. You have Detroit at 13, right? I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't flirt with Washington at all, which is good. Detroit is no. Detroit. Here's the fishy thing: is Monty Williams worth 11 wins?
If a coach is going to be,
last year,
I think.
I mean, partly year, but.
Well, very briefly. I think he played 30 games? He was out a lot of the year.
12. So, okay, is Cade playing a half a year or more and Monty Williams? Okay, I probably made the wrong. Did you go under or over for Detroit?
I went over.
You did? So 28
is have them above Charlotte. Yeah.
So you had to go 28, basically.
Right.
So if I told you they won 33 games this year, are you surprised?
33? Yes, because they won 17 last year. I mean, that's
It would literally double the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. All right. I don't really want to care about any of these teams. Here's the problem. Everyone's picking them as this pretty prima donna, they're gonna do this, they're gonna get to that 40 win mark. I'm like, no, they're not.
No.
But I still think they're really good. That's the scary thing, is I think they're talented, and that's the Monty Williams thing that scares me, is he's never really coached a team this young. So it's kind of like, I don't even know if he's the kind of coach for this kind of team. So maybe that's the problem. But I'm not a Cade Cunningham truther either. So I guess I kind of have the problem here. So I went under, thinking that if they win 26, which is still an improvement, are we really that many years from them being anywhere close to 40? It's just crazy to think that a team with Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, maybe that's the problem. I'm blanking already, right? Some of the teams, Oscar Thompson, some other guys.
Oscar Thompson, yeah.
So maybe we are closer to 17.
Sasser there as well as a rookie. Okay. I think next year we could see them and Orlando in the play-in, and that would be a really, really fun play-in matchup.
Wow. That would be doubling their win total at that, or not doubling. That would be close to doubling. I mean, because if they win 26, they would have to get to 14 more to get to the 40-ish win mark. If we think 40 is the safe number for the play-in next year.
Right. That tends to be kind of like that Mendoza line. Yeah. But again, when you start at 17, you kind of have to. There's a lot more room to improve.
I feel bad for Detroit fans, but I also don't. So that's all I have to say about Detroit. I'll end with this on Washington, and then we'll get out of here and get the West started. 23.5 for Washington. I'm not even going to ask the fishy thing, because it's fishy. Just looking at it's fishy. Detroit won 17 games last year, and Washington's worse. How is it not under?
Oh, it's under. They're the worst team in
All
the
right,
East.
we're done
It's
then.
under. Yeah.
We're done then. That's how I looked at it. It's as simple as
If you
Detroit
think
won
Jordan
17.
Poole shooting 58 times a week is going to win you 24 games, I had bad news for you.
Would
And
love to
that's if he
know.
cares.
I would love to know if we can get it pulled up fast enough what his season point total is for
It
points.
should be like 26 because he's going
I
to, his
yeah,
shot attempts are going to set records that will
I
not
would
be
not be
broken.
I would not be shocked if it was remotely close to that. Yeah, if it was pretty close to that. So
I
I'll
mean,
just
it's
search Jordan
him
Poole. Let's
and
see.
Kuzma and Koulibaly. I mean, it's, yeah.
I just searched Jordan Poole. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this because FanDuel, shout out to FanDuel Sportsbook. They were the provider for the lines for this. And that'll be my plug while I'm starting to look for this. There's probably no way I'm going to be able to find it. Oh, yeah, I did find it. All right, points per game on the season. And you're going to have to get through all the Damian Lillards of the world and da-da-da-da. Let's see. Point
26 and a
season
half, probably.
average. To average 24 plus points per game, he's minus 145 to average more than 24 a game.
So it's probably 25 and a half. I mean,
Yeah. So
he will have every opportunity to do it. But
through,
they're going to be the worst team in the East. And it's not
he
going to be close. I wouldn't be
is
surprised if they go over to 20.
plus 195 to average more than 26. So yeah, that's about right. You had it right there. 24
At
to
some point, they're going
26
to tell him
was
to
the
stop
go.
shooting. But
Yeah.
but it's going to be ugly.
All right. Quick recap before we get closed up. Milwaukee, and I think we basically didn't differ on the over under except for some of the bad teams. So basically, I had Milwaukee
Right.
over, Boston over, Cleveland over, New York over, and it's also going to be on the bottom of the screen. Same thing with the West when we transition over there in a second. New York over, Philly under, Miami under, Atlanta over, Indy over, Indiana. Don't know why I called them Indy. Brooklyn over, Orlando over, Toronto over, Chicago under, Charlotte over, Detroit under, and Washington under. We basically didn't really differentiate that much. Those lines were courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook. Check out in your local area, signupexpert.com. You're able to use the link that I'll have in the top of the description to be able to sign up for any daily fantasy or legalized sportsbook in your area. You click your place in Toronto or the United States in the continental U.S., you'll be able to select your location there, sign up, and you'll get a promotion that's eligible at the time. Free money. Wherever you pick that site, you'll get that promotion, and it supports the show and it makes all of these things possible. And also how I can keep Grayson around for a Chargers game on a Monday night for 3 hours. So, but yeah, thank you to Sign Up Expert. All right, let's get on out of here. Thank you again for coming on, which, again, I'll see you in 30 seconds, but thank you again for coming on. If you enjoyed this podcast, you will enjoy the Western Conference as well. Don't forget to check out the Everything College Basketball magazine. By the time this is out, that will be as well, available for $10. Pre-orders have ended, so you'll get it for $10. 363 teams in the country, 362. I got the number right, I think, finally. And you'll be able to see a preview for every single team. It's going to be in just north of 500,000 words. So we really appreciate all the support on that. All the support on this. If you're going to do any gambling, signupexpert.com. You'll be able to get signed up for your first-time bonuses. This has been the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we will see you in the Western Conference if you listen to this first.